Please welcome Malika Saada to the stage.
Hey everybody, good morning. So good to be here with you. I want to bring our panel up onto the stage. You good?
Am I good?
You're good. Good. Ilyse, why don't we start out with you? I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves and the work that you are presently doing.
I am Ilyse Hogue. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and for the last 6.5, oh, yay! Go Nats, Natitude, yes. For the last 6.5 years, I have been the president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, which is, oh, well, thank you. I guess I don't need to say what it is. Perfect. Gloria?
Okay, all right. Hi there. I'm Gloria Feldt. I am co-founder and president of Take the Lead. We are a nonprofit organization whose mission is nothing less than gender parity in leadership in every sector by 2025. So hopefully you're with me. And I've done a few other things in my life, which we'll get to eventually. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura Mays. I'm a founder of Mom 2.0 and the Mom 2.0 Summit. We are a professional community of women in media, 80% of whom happen to be moms. And we have an annual conference and a year-long conversation about all kinds of things.
Hi, I'm Czonstka. I lead institutional sales at the Vanguard group. Vanguard, I'm representing the private and corporate sector on this panel, but Vanguard has a mission of making investing accessible to all Americans. At Vanguard, I serve on our executive team that's focused on female leadership advancement, and I also ran our charitable campaign that was focused on early childhood development. So I'm sure we'll be covering those topics throughout the conversation.
So Ilyse, I want to start with you. Given the arc of your leadership around reproductive health and reproductive justice, I would love for you to talk to us about where you feel we are right now, what you have witnessed, what your fears are for where we are right now, but also your hope and belief.
So we are undoubtedly at an inflection point, and for those of you who do not know, Gloria was the president of Planned Parenthood for a very long time, so she has a very long history that predates mine in this movement, so I'm sure she will have a lot to say about this, but we have been walking towards this precipice for some time and trying to sort of, create a divergent path, but we failed to do that. And so we are at an inflection point. I do believe that the next year will determine the reproductive rights, freedom, and justice for an entire generation of people, if not more. And that is for a really significant reason. It is largely because the anti-choice movement knows that it is completely outnumbered, that people who support reproductive freedom and justice writ large, but legal access to abortion specifically, far outnumber the people in this country that do not. So they have bided their time. They have taken over state legislatures. They have taken over the courts at the lower level. They have been ready for the moment where they would have a president to take the entire Supreme Court. Along the way, because I know you guys got to hear Stacey this morning, they have recognized the intersection between voter suppression and achieving their goals. And reproductive oppression obviously is synonymous and goes hand in hand with racism and misogyny that has come to fuel the right. And so why do I say that this is an inflection point? They are both emboldened and desperate, right? They finally have the Supreme Court. They know they're outnumbered, and so they are going for broke. What does that look like? We hear a lot about overturning Roe. That feels very legalistic to me, so let me paint a picture of what's already going on in many, many states around the country. Overturning Roe means criminalizing abortion and punishing people who seek them, disproportionately but not exclusively women, and that is already happening, right? We actually have seen women put in jail for seeking abortion around the country. It does not stop there, and I'm just gonna give you a couple of other examples. What they're really testing is whether or not a fetus has more rights than the person attached to the pregnancy, and they are doing that in multiple ways, including one case in Alabama where a woman was shot in the stomach during a fight and she was pregnant, and they imprisoned her for getting shot in the stomach. These are all different ways of them to establish a hierarchy of rights. And then one county in Montana that passed ordinance saying that pregnant people had to report to the county officials for monitoring. We're also seeing that happen in Missouri, where it turns out that the state was monitoring menstrual periods of people who went to Planned Parenthood, as well as in ICE detention, women are being monitored. So that is the moment that we're in. And let's be clear, this is about using our ability to reproduce as a means of oppression that props up the existing predominantly white, predominantly male, predominantly cis, and predominantly right-wing Christian status quo. So that is the moment that we are at. They are going for broke, but our superpower is us. Our superpower is the backlash that we have seen over the last year. It's what we saw Tuesday in Virginia and Kentucky. Kentucky now has a pro-choice governor. Virginia has two pro-choice chambers in the state legislature and a pro-choice governor, and we are seeing that happen in places where women disproportionately helped fuel the wins in 2018 that allowed us to flip state chambers and then came back. You heard a lot about the bans sweeping the country. You heard less about actually what went well, which is that we've had 8 bills passed in state houses around the country that actually secure the right to access abortion and decriminalize it, because it's still actually criminal in many states' laws because they're pre-Roe laws, and protect people who need reproductive health care. We're also seeing progress in the intersection of these issues. We're seeing progress in the movements that are fueling change, recognizing that there is a continuum of necessary freedoms that start with when you're trying not to get pregnant, continue when you're facing an unintended pregnancy, but also that recognizing part of our reproductive freedom and justice is being supported when we parent. So that is all progress, but that's also all what's on the line right now, and it's going to require everyone to use this inflection point to not just go back to where we were, where Roe was the standard, but Roe should be the floor. The ceiling is what we are all here to fight for today.
So, Gloria, I know you were once Planned Parenthood's president, but I want to talk about the work that you are doing now around women and leadership. And I want you to share with us your observations on how the construct of women's leadership has changed post-Me Too, or the Me Too era that we are in, and against the backdrop of a Trump presidency.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Well, so when I finished my career at Planned Parenthood, which was a good, wonderful 30 years, and I wouldn't take anything for it, but not too long after that, Elle magazine asked me to write an article about women running for office. It was in 2008. It was right at the first time when it seemed like we were going to have our first woman president. Does anybody remember that moment? Okay. So it was at that point that I became obsessed with why women had opened doors and changed laws and were half of the workforce, were earning 57% of the college degrees, had the power of the purse, were buying 85% of the goods and products, making the decisions, at least for the families, about where the money was going. And yet, we were under 20% at that time of the top leadership in every single sector across the board. And so I became obsessed with figuring that out, and being a practical activist, of course, I wanted to figure out what to do about it. And so in answer to your question, Malika, what I concluded is that until women have equal power, equal pay, and equal position, we will keep fighting the same old battles over and over again. And we have to think very differently today, much more proactively, much more intentionally The challenge of the 20th century was to open those doors and change those laws and to begin to give women the opportunity. But the challenge of the 21st century, and I'm talking to all of you women here today, the challenge of the 21st century is to keep walking through those doors in spite of all of these things that may make us feel like we're going backwards. I agree completely with Ilyse that we are at a strategic inflection moment where things can change massively, because it's in these moments where things feel like they are in conflict and chaos when you can really make the big changes in society and in culture. So this is our moment, if we choose to take it. But these moments go by quickly. And in answer to your question about the Me Too movement, I see it only as a positive for several reasons. First of all, women are using our voices to speak up and to express issues that we have been dealing with forever. I mean, I'm old enough that I learned how to just kind of do a little dip and move away. You know, it was just how things were. The basic harassment in general in a workplace. And that was even when I was working in institutions that were primarily female. The few men who were involved were still, I mean, you know, it was still that same culture. So number one, I think it's great that women are using our voices. Secondly, I think it's great that we are beginning to understand how deeply ingrained objectification and violence against women's bodies, our very personas are within our culture. I just don't think we realize that, and I agree that, I mean, that's really so much, that's the root of opposition to women's reproductive self-determination. It's a way of keeping us as second-class citizens. The third reason is that as difficult as it is, and I know there's blowback right now, but I don't have any sympathy at all for those men who say, oh, now I don't know how to talk to women. Oh, BS. You know, what did you learn in kindergarten, right? You learn to keep your hands to yourself. And that's just all it's really about. So I think it's a very positive. I think the challenge for women is to stay in that positive mode, because it's hard. It's sometimes hard in the course of a day to have to deal with this all the time. But that's our challenge, and it's also our opportunity. So I think, you know, for women's leadership right now, there has never been a better moment. And the core of the program that I've developed for Take the Lead is around deconstructing power as it has been given to us in a very hierarchical male model of power over things and people, and transforming that into an understanding that actually power has no attributes of its own. It's what we do with it, what our intention is for it. So we as women can redefine power, and in so doing, we can change the whole culture from a belief that there's a finite pie to an understanding that the more there is, the more there is. And if I help you and you help me, we both have more. And there's no limit to human intelligence, innovation, creativity, the things that matter in an economy that's based on brains, not brawn. So this is our moment, but moments don't last. We have to take them. So take it.
So, Laura, what I really wanted to surface with you in terms of your leadership is that the work that you are doing allows you to braid together your mothering and your leadership. And I really want to hear about what that has been like for you, and also has it made you both a better leader and mother in being able to have both roles intersected?
It's an interesting question. I never thought I would be a mother. I'm the oldest of 5 in my family growing up, and so I feel like I was a mother very early on in my life. I felt like I was in charge of a lot of kids at about the age of 10. So I was like, I think I'm done with that. But apparently it's ingrained in me, and I think that I came from very strong women. And very strong women who did not have a voice in any way. I mean, my great-grandmother, I'm struck listening to you. It's just a good reminder about And Stacey Abrams was a great reminder this morning about how far we've come, really in a short amount of time. I mean, my great-grandmother was alive 75 years ago, and I wish that she had had Instagram so I could know what she was thinking or what was interesting to her, what she found important. She had zero voice. And all my people are from Texas. I'm like 9th generation Texan, which means I was Mexican at some point, nationality-wise and otherwise. And it just was a different culture that I came from. Women were very strong and had zero voice. But we all have voices, even if we don't have a phone that connects us to the entire world, so that we do now. We didn't have amplification. They didn't have amplification or any record of what they were thinking or talking about or doing. And so I think it's in my DNA. I think it's in all of our DNA. We all come from strong women. We do. We come from strong people. That's why we're here. And we just have more resources now and more opportunity now. And we have, rectangles in our pockets that allow us to connect with 10 people in a text group or 1 million people on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you are. So we have the opportunity and I think the responsibility to use our voice and to use our platform and to use the rectangle in our pocket for more than reading about whatever the latest Kardashian is doing or whatever. I mean, that's delightful, I guess. But also we have an opportunity to really put good out in the world. And so I don't know. I just feel super lucky to be alive right now in that case. I mean, I know it's a very tricky time, but it's also like, oh my gosh, we can do so much. And so I'm lucky enough to be a part of a large group of women who have found each other on the internet, starting with mom bloggers 15 years ago and morphing into influencers, parental influencers, millennial, Gen Z influencers today. And, so we have an annual event for, there's 1,500 people in the room who represent an audience of 100 million and 1 billion or 3 billion impressions or something. And when we get it's crazy numbers. It's like space numbers. You can't even get your brain around it. So that's all good and fine, but then you kind of nail it down with back to my household. I have one son. He is 14 and very skeptical at this point in his life of everything, but he grew up watching his mom make posters and throw events for other people to make posters and marching on the streets and putting things out in different ways. I mean, we all do it in our own ways. Everyone has their medium. What we do is harness that and promote that and ask the question, how can I help promote what you have going on? This is a very important issue. How can I tell my friends about it? How can I tell more people about it? What is the best way to do that? And so the responsibility of having, and we all have it, I mean, I'm just specifically talking about, I feel responsibility for 1,500 women in a room, 10,000 women in a community, and helping them talk about what's important to them, give them voices, give them platforms to promote their voices, and give them connections to amplify their platforms. So there's so many things. I mean, I think that's the key, is not getting overwhelmed. And motherhood, I mean, our community is 80% mothers, 20% not mothers, 100% extra maternal energy for everyone. But it's interesting to see kind of what people, we ask questions. We say, what are you interested in? What are you interested in promoting? And we are, moms take care of everyone throughout the year, so we try to provide a refuge for moms to get resources. So refuge is our theme this year, and for 2020. And so I think the challenge is selecting what you want to do or where you want to put your energy, because we only have so much time energy, and resources. And so really looking at that and refining that and how that would work best for you and your family is tricky. And so, but for us, we're like, okay, refuge is our key. So this year we're really gonna focus on maternal mental wellness, which translate to family mental wellness and mental wellness for the entire planet. I'm just gonna put it out there. And then also for refuge for immigrant families and dealing with, I'm in Texas, so we're, our company and our community is across the world, but this summer, immigration became a very big issue right down the street from my house, in a town that my dad grew up in. And so I was reading things in this is just like a very grassroots example to finally answer your question, in that I have, my father passed away 2 years ago, and I'm reading the New York Times, and there's an article about an ICE facility in the town that he grew up in, which is tiny. It's the tiniest town. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can drive there right now. It's saying they don't have diapers and blankets, and I can make 3 phone calls to Unilever and Target and whoever, and we can get everything they need. Amazon Prime's like today, like what do you need? So I called them and said, hi, I'm a private citizen. I just read in the New York Times that you don't have blankets. I can give you, well, how many do you need? I will get them there to you, if not today, tomorrow. And they hung up on me.
Oh my gosh.
And another friend of mine, I told this, but she actually grew up in this town where my dad grew up. She has a mid-sized mom community online. And I called her because I was mad. And I was like, can you believe this happened? And she's like, I'm calling them right now. So she did the same thing. And then she went on Facebook, and they did the same thing. And because they didn't want they wanted, it's cruelty. They're not wanting to provide anything. So she got online, and my son is sitting at the table while I'm screaming in the phone. So he's seeing the rage. I mean, it's very much literally at our dining room tables sometimes. And I say, let it out, ladies. Like, let your kids see you mad. It's fine. And then she got online. I mean, this is so basic, guys. Everyone could do stuff like, we come up with these things all the time. She got online, and she just sort of yelled into, I think, Facebook about how this had happened. I was hung up on, she was hung up on, how, this is so frustrating. And, mostly people were like, yeah, how did that happen? Uncool, no, I want to help too. Let me know if you figure it out, da-da-da. And one, very supportive and whatever, as we do. And one person was like, okay, keyboard warrior, so easy for you to say. Why don't you just get your ass down to the border and actually help? And she's like, that is literally what we're trying to do. She wrote this really kind of thing back. And then she was like, no, you're right. She was like, hey, this person was like, I am on the border. My husband is a border patrol person. How do we get, what? And she's like, what do you need? And forged with this woman who came at her with rage, because we're all frustrated in our own ways with different things, and we express it differently and process it differently. And she was like, how can I help you? And she's like, if you really want to help, we have, and my husband, I'm working with the Valverde Border Humanitarian Coalition. It's a brand new thing. We're bringing in our shampoo from home to help people. We're doing what we can. But if you really want to help fancy blogger lady, then here's an Amazon wish list. The Amazon wish list was filled in 30 minutes because she put it out there, we put it out there. Then it expanded. We ended up taking people to Valverde. This is all within a week. Someone in our community works for Supernatural, which is a television show, who was doing something at Comic-Con. And they wanted to do a give back campaign for the people standing in line. In 2 days, they raised $1 million from people standing in line at Comic-Con. for the Valverde Border Humanitarian Coalition, a little organization that was barely functioning, and people were bringing in shampoo from home, and then they were able to supply so much for the entire border, because it ended up being like, as they said, not my words, but they were like, we were like the start of the Underground Railroad for the border families and the people who work in border facilities who are trying to help the people. And so it was very like, they're sneaking them shampoo, they're sneaking them things like that. This is super basic, but my point is that my son, it was summer, and I dragged him along with me, so frustrated. He's 14, he doesn't want to do anything, but to see every single step of the way of how we're doing it. And I think what you were saying, like, this is our time. And we kind of just, when you're talking about how would I plan for next year in my giving, no one can plan for that. Like, you have to leave room for magic, and you have to kind of show up with wherever you're needed. And that's tricky in real life to do that, because we're all planners, and we have, I have $22 and I have 15 minutes. What can I do to help? And that's sometimes all we have, but I think just being present and showing up in that and bringing your people along with you, your people in your rectangle, because you never know what resources they had. Like, when Jill was responding to the woman coming at her, she could never have projected that, like, oh, you know what? There's someone at Mom 2, and then they work for Supernatural, and I bet we can get into Comic-Con, and then we can raise $1 million. Like, you could never plan for things like this. So I think just leaving room for magic and also bringing your people along with you.
Thank you. Amber, I think, as the lone representative of the private sector.
Representing the private sector.
That's right. When I was on the NGO side and we looked at the private sector, it was really to think about philanthropy, right? So how might we be able to create a relationship with a corporation for purposes of philanthropy? But there has been a real change in the private sector such that the conversation is moving away from philanthropy only to this emerging discussion around moral obligation, social impact. The example of the Business Roundtable talking about principles. And this is new language, and some folks are suspicious of it as well. But I think it's an interesting and powerful change, and you've been part of all of that, and would love for you to speak to it.
Sure. So, I want to start by saying I think Vanguard's a bit different in this space because we were founded with this philanthropic or social purpose, which is to give Americans access to the markets during a time when investment fees were incredible, and accessibility was not there for the average American. So I think we were founded from a place of social justice from the start, but I think we've grown a long way. I actually think, I would argue, for corporate America and the private sector, this is a Darwinism issue. I mean, I think if you do not take a stand on social issues, and you're not showing that you are here for a broader purpose, you're going to die. Because I think the next wave of folks that are working for and investing in these companies are expecting it and demanding it. And that would be one of my asks for everybody in this room. At Vanguard, I think we've really transitioned as we've grown we represent, we are a primary shareholder or majority shareholder in so many Fortune 500 companies, and we vote proxy every single day. We hit a pivot point as a firm to say, how are we going to use this position of power for good? And so, I encourage you to read the research about what we've done, but D&I is a perfect example. When we're voting in new board members or executive leaders for Fortune 500 companies, we're putting a diversity and inclusion lens on every one of those votes, and we're pushing back if they're electing executives and board members that are not getting them closer to 30% female representation. So we've taken our stand, and actually we're pushing to make an impact there. The other part that Vanguard's focused on when it comes to social justice is very early down the pipeline. We're a firm that very much believes in financial wellness and literacy. We stand for that. But you can't achieve financial literacy if you don't have literacy. And you look at the Philadelphia area, we have 34% of children under 6 in the Philadelphia area where Vanguard's founded they are growing up in extreme poverty. They don't have a single book in their homes. So we've really used our position to invest in developing literacy, developing early childhood development, so that folks can get to a place, and this is a minority issue too. I mean, there's definitely a minority lens you can put onto this, where they're able to invest their dollars and they can have investment success. The other thing that we're doing that's very applicable to this room on the social end is the gender pay gap issue. So we talk about how women make up 80% of what men make every single day. What women are also doing is they're not investing those dollars. So 52% of women in America do not have a single dollar in a financial product. So a big push for Vanguard is how do we create gender equity when it comes to investing and growing money? Part of why we're here today. We've been really pushing to say, how do we access more females? I mean, my personal job is I sell Vanguard products and services in the retirement plan space. The 401k balance represents the primary account for most Americans. So how do we make sure we're reaching more female investors through that channel? So those are just a few examples of what we're doing that's beyond just, running product. And I think, quite frankly, more and more American investors and folks that are entering in the workforce are going to expect that from the corporate and private sector. It's going to be a requirement in order to thrive.
Absolutely. We don't have that much time left, and I did want to make sure that folks were able to ask questions from the audience. So I want to throw some time for folks to be able to do that if there are questions. Go ahead.
I'm sure Ilyse has an answer to that, but I have one too. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'll go after you.
Okay, so one of my 9 leadership power tools that I teach women in the Take the Lead program is embrace controversy. It is your friend. It gives you an opportunity. It gives you a platform. It gives you an opportunity to have a conversation when people are paying attention. So the advice I always give to people in those kinds of situations is, first you have to decide if you're willing to utilize your energy in that way. And one of the other power tools is wear the shirt, as in of your convictions. If this is what you believe and this is what you authentically believe, then it's worth a risk of wearing that shirt publicly and making sure that people do know. And that is what your brand stands for, and you will have more friends than enemies. But truly, when controversy emerges, it is the best opportunity you ever have to get known better, to have people talking about you, to have an opportunity to, in the media, in everywhere, virally and without having to even pay for it, to have people knowing what your brand is, and the friends you will make will far outnumber the enemies who will eventually go away.
That's right.
That's my 2 cents worth.
I'll just add to that quickly. First of all, thank you for putting yourself out there, because you doing that matters. You're not going to get all of your clients. That's what we know. But, the thing that I actually, because we work a lot with celebrities, of course, and there is a small subset right now. Shonda Rhimes has been amazing in her advocacy and her normalizing of abortion specifically. But the thing that I remind the people that we work with who have higher profiles, and I was telling Amber, it was very important to us that in the wake of the criminalization of abortion and forced pregnancy laws coming out of Georgia and Alabama earlier this year, we had over 200 corporate CEOs sign a full-page New York Times ad in support. It was called Don't Ban Equality, right? And so I think that there are 3 rules that we take into any conversation, knowing you're not going to get anyone. 1, this is not about abortion. This is about power and control on one side. It is about freedom and equity on the other side, and you got to pick a side. 2, the other side that is about power and control depends on our silence because they know there are more of us than there are of them. And therefore, if you are nervous, they will yell at you, but there are more of us than there are of them, and you will also get more love when you put yourself out there. I was terrified. Slight tangent, I told my own personal abortion story from the stage of the Democratic National Convention in 2016. It's the scariest thing I've ever done. Was not on my bucket list, but gets to, with privilege comes responsibility. I had the stage, the stakes were high. Your clients have the stage, the stakes are high, right? And then, what I was telling Amber is the data backs that up. The reason we got 200 CEOs is because we combined a values question with a data report that basically said your consumers, your employees want you to take a stand, not even we did broadly on reproductive freedom and justice, but specifically on abortion as a matter of freedom and equity, and the numbers show it.
And people have daughters.
Yeah.
And Amber, I know you want to get in on this, so I'm going to let you answer, and then I want to take another question.
No, I was just going to make the comment really brief that, there's all these books that are out now that are really letting you get an inside view of the Me Too movement and how that momentum grew. So I just finished Ronan Farrow's book to talk about Take Your Breath Away, right? And what struck me is it started with just a few people, right? So I would say, lean into these folks that have volunteered to do it and watch the exponential growth happen from there. I think the folks that are turning it down are going to watch their star shine, and they'll regret that they're not participating.
Other questions that folks have? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. What's the first step? I would say put $1 in your 401k plan. For goodness, it's just doing something. And in most instances, for folks that have access to benefits right now, there's tools in your 401k that are going to help you with next dollar optimization. It does not have to be a scary concept. Save, right? Go to Vanguard.com. Go look at the tools that we have. One of the best podcasts in the world is a podcast that we produce. It's called The Planner and the Geek. One of the things about Vanguard, the financial services industry is an industry that's been built on sort of over-complication and intimidation. For most women, to meet with a financial advisor is the equivalent of going to meet with a used car salesman, right? They're going to throw a bunch of financial jargon at you. But there's firms like Vanguard that are emerging. Sally Krawcheck's firm is another great example of that they're making the topic of finances so much more goal-oriented, so much more accessible. Even the way we talk about things like risk. Studies show that women, they don't take on risk because they view it differently. So men are in more aggressive financial instruments, and then the wealth just continues to grow, and we're putting 70% of our assets into cash, right? So go out and just look at these tools that put financial concepts into sort of layman's terms. But if you need an immediate first step, just put $1 in your 401k plan. In most instances, in most corporate plans, there's some sort of company match. You're missing out on that compounding. Do that before you establish an emergency fund or pay down debt. That would be the advice that I would give as an initial step. But I'm around here too if you want to talk about other specific tools or resources. I think we spend way too much time talking about the pay issues in the gender pay gap, and they're incredibly important. We don't talk about the other side of this, which is growing your money, which is so critical to women out there.
My friend Nellie Galan says, buy buildings, not shoes. It's a good way to
like
think
that.
about it. Good way to think
I,
about
I
it.
also think it's a complicated conversation in terms of the different places that women are at, right? And coming out of a background of doing work around gender-based violence, looking at the ways in which violence stops women from being able to have access to economic stability, let alone growth. So the conversation exists on many different planes when we talk about women and financial literacy.
Yeah, 100%. I'll never forget. I went through this moment. I went through a divorce when I was in my early 30s. I was in graduate school at the time, and I sat down with my lawyer, and she said, like, you are one of the very few because you are financially independent. And I was in a relatively emotionally abusive situation, but I had my own income. I understood how to run a budget. She's like, most women I meet with are helpless, right? They're in emotionally or physically abusive situations. They've never had access to their household finances. I mean, this is a massive issue, a personal passion of mine that we need to address as a country is helping, even from a regulatory environment, like things like giving women education and access when they're going through a divorce and getting out of an abusive situation about their right to that they have to their husband's assets, his 401k plan. A lot of that just doesn't exist today. There's great regulations and there's great lawmakers out there that are focused on this. Unfortunately, not much is moving in DC right now. So I do think there's an opportunity for us to address this.
On that note, can I address just the flip side really quickly, which is financial literacy is linked to the way that we invest, and it's the way we invest in change. Yeah. So we still have more men investing in politics, more men investing in male candidates. And I was complaining to these ladies before the panel that we still have concentration of wealth among a small number of families, but male-led families that are not investing in the candidates who would bring gender equity, who would bring the regulation, who would level the playing field, and on all sorts of things from reproductive health to domestic violence to regulatory structures that economically benefit women. So if everybody in this room had $3 to give, think about how much that would be in the pocket of a cause or a candidate, and then using the other model is like, then you broadcast that out. That's how we catch up.
And one more thing, just one more thing.
One more thing.
I believe there are a number of entrepreneurs in this conference, and I encourage you to set higher intentions than you ever thought you could have, and think about building wealth at a level that you never might have imagined you could have done at a Google, at a Vanguard, at a, whatever level. Think about that, because that will truly change the power balance, and that will change everything.
Last question. Oh. Yes, got to clap for that. And last question.
That.
Well, should we just go down the line and
Yeah,
make that the
let's do
last
that.
question? Thank you. It is an excellent question, and I'm going to give you a very unspecific answer, which is follow your heart and use this as an opportunity to exercise your power to ask questions.
Yes.
I love when donors come to me and say, what are these programs? What's the impact? What does this buy me? What does this buy me? Because it means that they're really thoughtful donors. And then that can inform how much you want to give, right? And when you should give, because every NGO, every organization we're a political organization. We have very different needs in 2020 than we do we had a lot in 2017 because we know what happened in 2016, but you know what I mean. So don't be shy. It does not matter. We have people in our organization who answer questions for people who give $5 and people who give $50,000. You are the investor. You should ask the questions, then you make the decision.
Everything Ilyse said, absolutely. And particularly the follow your heart part of it. I will say that, and I'm thinking about this for myself right now, which is with 2020 being the important year that it is, I am thinking proactively about how much I can budget
Yes.
next year for political candidates that I believe in, particularly. So I think that needs to be a part of our equation. And all I need is $5 million to make Take the Lead sustainable. So I'm just putting that out there. You know, somebody's going to write that check.
I think there are all kinds of resources. There's financial resources, there's a time resource, and it really is looking at them differently. My experience with our community and with everyone I know is just trying to find where to give things is sometimes more, like exactly what is more difficult than even allocating the time or the money, oddly. So, I mean, one thing we're doing as an organization is trying to pull resources of a lot of people who feel like, I have $50 and half an hour, what can I do? But when you add up all of the people who have $50 in half an hour, that's a lot of time and money. And if you can give a lot of time and money to one organization or 5 organizations, that's very beneficial, obviously. So Mom 2 is partnering with Amy Poehler Smart Girls to work on a platform for 2020 where people can go online and be like, I have 15 minutes and $50. I'm interested in these things, how can I help? Mm-hmm. And just connecting people to need connection. Mm-hmm. So that's where our heads are. But as far as advice, I would look to you.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that was said. For me, it's about defining my personal mission and legacy and then aligning my giving to that. So for me personally, like why I exist and what I want to leave behind is I want to help women find and gain power through financial wellness and through career advancement. And so that's my North Star, and that's where I guide my dollars, is the organizations that are making that happen. So I think having that focus, especially in the beginning when you only have so much to give, is incredibly important.
Thank you guys so much. It's been a privilege to be here with you.
Thank you, Malika.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.